Hey there. All right, everyone, it's Catherine Middlebrooks at BRB Yoga here again to talk about leaking. All right, so let's talk about leaking. In general, a lot of people think if you leak, right, if you pee yourself, when you jump on a trampoline, you sneeze, you laugh, all those things, people think, I've got a weak pelvic floor, I need to do more Kegels. Hopefully by now, I've talked about this enough that you know that's not always the case. More Kegels aren't always the answer. And today I'm really going to dive into the why. Okay, so if you are someone who leaks, first, just know, common, not normal, doesn't need to happen. But let's talk about why that could be the case. So if you are leaking, it doesn't necessarily mean that your, sorry, I got cut off for a second. If you are leaking, it doesn't mean necessarily that your pelvic floor muscles are underactive. It could also mean that they are overactive, hyperactive, that your pelvic floor muscles are holding on for dear life, trying to create stability for you in some way. So whether or not you have underactive or overactive pelvic floor muscles, both sides of the spectrum are weak. A muscle is only strong. It can only be strong. It can only contract properly when it is contracting from a fully relaxed position. In the case of overactive pelvic floor muscles, your pelvic floor muscles are constantly firing. They're never relaxed. So then when you do something like sneeze, those pelvic floor muscles, they're so tired, they're working so hard, they don't have the strength to stop you from peeing yourself. On the other side of the spectrum, if you have underactive pelvic floor muscles, then they are just weak and they don't have the strength to stop you either. You will sneeze, they're not strong enough to support you. But there is this kind of misconception that weak muscles mean that you need to work them more. Not always the case. If you have overactive pelvic floor muscles, they can be weak too, and then Kegels would not be the answer. So how do you know what you have? Well, you know, it's helpful to go see a pelvic floor physiotherapist, but there are some kind of general things you can go with to get a sense of which side of the spectrum you fall on. If you have a weak pelvic floor, an underactive weak pelvic floor, the muscles just aren't kind of showing up for the game, then you are likely to feel like you can't hold a Kegel, right? You try and do a Kegel and it happens, and then the muscles start shaking and quaking and it lets go. You're not strong enough to hold it. You may also feel like tampons don't fit very well for you anymore after you've had a baby. Sex probably doesn't feel quite the same. It's not necessarily painful, but it doesn't feel the same. You know what I mean, right? If that's you, you know what I mean. You also may just be more of a relaxed type personality. It tends to go hand in hand. If you're more relaxed, your pelvic floor may also be more relaxed. Now, on the other side, what is it if you have an overactive pelvic floor that's also weak? What are those signs and symptoms? Well, you're someone who may very well have pain during intercourse. You may find that you have a really hard time getting a full breath in. You have a hard time because the pelvic floor is so tight, it's preventing the diaphragm from working the way it's supposed to work. So you can't breathe well. You may find that you have to pee a lot or have a second pee, like you go and then you're like, oh my gosh, I didn't finish. I still have more to get out. The pelvic floor isn't allowing you to release your bladder fully. You may also, when you try and do a Kegel, find that you don't really feel much happening. It's not that you're engaging and then it lets go. It's that, I don't know, am I Kegling? Is that working? You don't know because it's already contracted. You may also find that when you do a Kegel, if you can do one, that then it feels a little bit painful in your pelvis. That's a sign that you have an overactive pelvic floor. Okay, also personality-wise, you're probably more type A, just a little more high-strung, so is your pelvic floor. So those are the two sides of the spectrum. What does that mean? What do you do? Well, if you have an underactive weak pelvic floor, then you want to get those muscles back in the game. For you, doing Kegels, practicing Kegels regularly will be very helpful. If you are someone who has an overactive pelvic floor that is also weak, you have got to get those pelvic muscles to relax. So for you, focusing on really solid, deep breathing that gets all the way into your pelvic floor. If you are getting a nice solid breath, you should be able to feel that when you inhale, you feel the pelvic floor relax and expand a little bit. It's the way it's designed to work. Inhale, it relaxes. You exhale, it contracts. So you want to focus on deep breaths, getting that pelvic floor to relax on those deep breaths. And for you, it may be very, very helpful to also incorporate meditation into your routine. If you can find a specific pelvic floor relaxation technique, that would be fantastic because that will help you specifically target the muscles of the pelvic floor to allow them to relax more. Okay, so two sides of the spectrum, underactive, overactive pelvic floor, both can be weak, both can create leaking. So don't just think because you pee yourself that you need to do more Kegels. That's not always the case. If you've got any questions about this, any thoughts, let me know in the comments below. Thank you everyone, and I will see you next week.